Howdy and welcome to Broken Tool Garage. As you guessed by that little intro clip, I'm doing a service on a rear end. Nice and lovely aroma that comes about that used gear oil and those things, right? So on this truck right here, I'm going to say that changing the rear end grease and putting new grease in is about a one gear. It really doesn't take much to do that. You'll need a couple things. Probably easier than changing oil, roughly. So if you can change oil, you can definitely do this. Now, I'm going to show some tricks on how to use RTV correctly to put the gasket on, or put the rear end cover back on. And some of y'all might have had a knee-jerk reaction to RTV as a gasket, but guess what? It's in the service manual. Check it out. The other thing I'm going to show is one of the tricks I have to get the gear oil back into the rear end. So this isn't using the whole half sit up, squeeze the jug thing, that's not fun. Now this is going to take about 3 quarts to fill it back up on my application, and it took about, I'm going to say 2 tasty beverages to get everything completely done. Now you need to factor in that RTV needs to dry for about 24 hours before you put the gear oil back into there, so just make sure you account for that. Let's just get into it. Alright, let's get to the rear end. Of course, that's on the back of the vehicle. That on this truck, since it's rear wheel drive, that's what propels it forward or backwards. It takes the engine, the power the engine makes, sends it through the transmission, which selects what gear you're in, and then it goes through a drive shaft to the rear end, and that converts your torque. It multiplies your input, and that's kind of what they mean. But if you got a 355 rear end, it means that whenever you turn, it takes 355 input revolutions to get 1 revolution out. So that's your torque multiplication of 3.55 times. Let's get some lights underneath there and dive underneath it and get started. Okay, this is the rear end. This is kind of commonly called the pumpkin part. This is what houses the gears in the gear oil. The gear oil actually flows down the tubes. So this cover right here is what holds that in. I'm going to be pulling this cover off, and there's no drain plug, so that's why I have all this extra stuff here. Gear oil's usually pretty nasty and smelly. A lot of people do not like to smell that at all. It's not potpourri, you just put it like that. So just some of the basic stuff right here. You have over here, here's the brake lines going across there, right? And then they tie into a little block right here into the brake hose, and it's just a single line all the way there down, right? And then this right here is actually a vent tube that just kind of comes up and hangs out up there. So if you build up any air pressure or whatever, it can vent and do just temperature change, atmosphere, or whatever, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get this cover off. Here is an identification tag on here. There's different codes you can look up to see what those mean. Different manufacturers do things differently. So let's get this cover off and start inspecting some stuff in here. Alright, this is what it looks like on the inside. This is your ring gear. This is going to be what's in every rear end right here. On the other side's the pinion where the drive shaft drives that gear, right? So, one of the things I wanted to look at here was this tone ring to see if it's all chewed up or anything. And I'm not seeing anything wrong with it. I'll look at a picture of a new one and make sure it's not that it's supposed to have that profile on the tooth, but I'm not seeing anything wrong with it. This rear end looks really good, especially for like 205,000 miles on it. There's no sharp edges, there's no slop or anything in it, which I'd really have to jack it up and kind of play with it, but I had it jacked up before and I tested the drive shaft, and it's just really good and tight. So this is just going to be a fluid change. I'll let this just sit here and drain for a little bit, then I'll clean up the surface, and I'll show you some tricks to getting that gasket back on. Actually, I'm not going to use a gasket. RTV is pretty much the common thing to use on this surface right here. It's a good machine surface. So that's what I'm going to be doing on this one right here. Okay, so I've cleaned off with the brake cleaner. I got the lid cleaned off right here, right? Ready to install it. So the last thing I need to do is put my RTV around there. You just need a little thin coat in between this. You don't have to do, you know, like a 1/2 inch big fat bead and cover the whole thing. Just needs to be a thin coat on there, and that's it. So I'll show you what it looks like. Just a thin coat on there. That's all you need. Let's go ahead and get this cover on. Move you out of the way.